My brother stormed into the family office, slamming a thick file onto the desk. "You've been taking money from Dad's accounts," he shouted, his face red with anger. I froze, my heart thumping so hard I thought it would burst. Mother and Dad were at the dining table, forks paused midair, eyes darting between us. My voice failed me. I could feel the weight of betrayal pressing down, and for a moment, I thought the room would collapse around me. My brother grinned maliciously, as though he already imagined the auditors arriving to humiliate me in front of the entire family. "I'm calling the auditors now," he added, the threat slicing through the air. I swallowed hard, reminding myself not to react impulsively. There was a strange calm beneath the panic, a tiny voice saying I wasn't powerless. I glanced at the papers he waved like a weapon, my father's name stamped on every line. I had handled Dad's finances for years, trusted to manage every detail, and yet here he was, using selective information to frame me. I clenched my fists under the desk, deciding that if this was a battle, I would fight smart, not rashly. The first move belonged to him, but the game was far from over. Without another word, my brother grabbed his phone and dialed the audit firm, his smug grin making my blood boil. I watched helplessly, feeling the tension thicken around me like a storm cloud. How had he gotten access to Dad's confidential financial records? My hands shook slightly as I tried to steady my breathing. The line connected, and I could hear the faint click of the call being answered. "Yes, I'd like to report some suspicious activity in the accounts managed by my sister," he said, emphasizing my role as if it were a crime. I remained silent, forcing myself to stay calm, even as panic prickled my skin. The auditor's voice came through the speaker. "We will need to start the investigation immediately." My stomach dropped, yet a spark of resolve lit within me. I knew that Dad had trusted me implicitly over the years. I had always managed the accounts with precision. Still, my brother had planted enough seeds of doubt to make this confrontation believable.
He thought he had me trapped.
But as I watched him smirk triumphantly, I realized something crucial. Every move he had made left traces. If I could find them, the power would quietly shift back into my hands. I closed my eyes, remembering the afternoon Dad had called me into his study years ago. He had placed his hand on my shoulder, eyes full of trust. "I want you to manage these accounts, Amira," he said. "I know you'll keep everything in order." My brother had always rolled his eyes at me, whispering to anyone who would listen that I'd never handle money properly, that I was naive and inexperienced. Now, standing accused by the very person who should have known me best, the injustice burned hotter than any anger I had ever felt. I opened my eyes to find my brother leaning casually against the desk, smirking as if he already knew the secret moves he had made to manipulate the records. The audacity stunned me. He had not only questioned my competence in front of our parents, but had also orchestrated an intricate setup to make it look like I had mismanaged Dad's money. Every instinct in me screamed to react, to shout, to defend myself, but I knew that raw emotion could be dangerous. Patience would be my weapon. I studied the file in his hands, mentally noting the errors and gaps he had left behind. Even as he gloated, I began planning the steps that would turn his arrogance into his downfall. Later that evening, the family gathered for dinner, the air thick with tension. My brother wasted no time casually dropping comments about my supposed mismanagement of Dad's accounts. He spoke as if everyone would immediately believe him, smirking whenever my father glanced up uncertainly. I maintained my composure, though a low simmer of anger rolled through me, coiling tight in my chest. Mother, subtly, nodded along, her glance suggesting she thought there might be truth in his claims. I swallowed my frustration and kept my tone neutral, replying only when necessary, carefully choosing each word. Dad kept silent, though his furrowed brows betrayed his concern. Every bite I took tasted like ash, each moment stretching the tension taut across the room. Yet beneath the outward calm, my mind raced, cataloging each inconsistency in my brother's story. I noticed how he avoided mentioning certain dates, how some numbers were slightly off, how a few transactions didn't match the patterns Dad had entrusted me to maintain. These small cracks would become the foundation for my strategy. I waited, watching him, studying every gesture, every smirk, storing each one. By the time dessert arrived, I had resolved that the next steps must be calculated. The family might be blind to the truth now, but soon, the evidence would speak louder than his lies. That night, I sat at my desk with the house quiet around me, the dim glow of the lamp illuminating a mountain of bank statements. I spread them across the table, eyes scanning every line, every transfer. Something felt off. A sense of déjà vu prickled at the back of my neck as I recognized patterns that didn't align with the usual flow of the accounts. Slowly, a hidden paper trail emerged, small transfers my brother had made to accounts no one had noticed. My pulse quickened. These weren't accidental. They were deliberate, almost careless mistakes that betrayed his overconfidence. I began documenting each one, making notes, marking inconsistencies, and recording dates. This was the first real advantage I had, a secret arsenal to counter his accusations. Each entry strengthened my resolve. I realized that if I moved carefully, methodically, I could expose him without risking a single misstep. The room seemed to hold its breath with me, the silence stretching and thickening as I plotted my next move. For the first time that day, I felt a flicker of hope. He had struck first, but he had left openings. When the next family dinner came, I would be ready. And this time, I wouldn't just defend myself. I would quietly reclaim the power he thought he held. My brother stormed into the family office, slamming a thick file on the desk. "You've been taking money from Dad's accounts," he shouted, eyes blazing. My heart pounded, and I froze. Mother and Dad paused at the dining table, forks in hand, watching. My voice failed. He smiled, thinking he had me trapped. "I'm calling the auditors now," he added. I clenched my fists under the desk, refusing to react rashly. I had managed Dad's finances for years, and I knew every detail. He wanted a public spectacle, but I would not give him one. Calmly, I studied the file, noting every irregularity he had left. His arrogance was his weakness. I reminded myself, patience would be my weapon. He had the first move, but the game was far from over. I would turn his attack into his downfall, quietly and strategically, and the truth would emerge. He grabbed his phone and dialed the audit firm, smirking. I watched helplessly, tension knotting in my chest. How had he obtained Dad's financial records? The line connected, and the auditor's calm voice replied, "We'll start the investigation immediately." Panic prickled, yet I forced calm. Dad had trusted me completely. My brother had planted doubts, but every action he had taken left a trail. I only needed to uncover it. I began analyzing the numbers in my mind, memorizing discrepancies he had overlooked. He thought he controlled the narrative, but I could quietly shift it back. I realized that my careful attention to detail, which he mocked for years, was now my advantage. While he gloated, I began forming a plan to expose his manipulations. The battle had begun, but it was far from over. Every move I made would count toward reclaiming my reputation. I remembered the day Dad handed me the family accounts. "I trust you, Amira," he said, placing a hand on my shoulder. My brother had always complained, whispering that I couldn't handle it. Now he accused me openly. I felt the sting of betrayal, but my mind cleared. My brother's smirk revealed he had manipulated records, but his arrogance made mistakes obvious. I studied the file carefully, noting the transfers he had overlooked and the inconsistencies he left behind. I could stay calm. Patience and observation were my weapons. Each subtle error he made was a clue. If I moved carefully, I could expose him without creating drama. His confidence blinded him to the patterns I could detect. Slowly, I began preparing evidence, knowing the day of reckoning was near. The first advantage was his, but with strategy, the power could shift. I would not falter. At dinner, my brother casually accused me of mismanaging Dad's funds. Everyone glanced at me. I held my calm, though anger simmered. Mother subtly backed him, and Dad's confusion grew. Each of his words was calculated to humiliate me, but I didn't react. I watched closely, noticing gaps in his story, errors in his numbers. His overconfidence made him careless. Each smirk, each glance, added to the evidence I would use later. I stayed polite, answering only when necessary, keeping my thoughts private. I noted the discrepancies, the dates, and the accounts he had misrepresented. Every minor detail built my strategy. This dinner was a battlefield. I was the quiet observer, gathering ammunition for the moment I would strike. He might have the room's attention now, but patience would become my ally. Soon, the truth would shine through his lies. Late at night, I sat at my desk under a dim lamp, scanning the bank statements. Something felt off. Small transfers my brother had made went unnoticed by everyone. His mistakes were careless yet deliberate. I began documenting each irregularity, noting dates and amounts. This was my first advantage. I realized that if handled carefully, these small slips could undo his entire scheme. Each record strengthened my resolve. I didn't need to confront him immediately. Quietly gathering evidence, I felt the first flicker of hope. He had acted first, but in doing so, he had exposed his own weakness. The next family dinner would be critical. I had to be ready to act with precision. For the first time that day, I felt control returning to me. My brother might have started the battle, but I was already planning the decisive moves. Mother began noticing tension in the household. Her questions were gentle, probing, and I answered carefully, giving nothing away while allowing curiosity to rise naturally. I watched her expressions change subtly, hints of doubt creeping in as she began questioning her son's certainty. I didn't push. I simply guided, letting the inconsistencies speak for themselves. Each interaction with Mother now carried weight. She was beginning to see cracks in my brother's story. Patience was everything. I knew if I let her observe carefully, she could become an unexpected ally. Meanwhile, my brother grew increasingly anxious, unaware that his credibility was slipping. The room felt thick with unspoken tension. Every glance, every question, every hesitation built the case quietly, invisibly, and powerfully. The family dynamic was subtly shifting, and I was steering it carefully. Soon, the balance would tip fully in my favor, and the truth would be undeniable. The auditors finally traced the transfers in full detail. As I had suspected, the trail led directly to my brother, not me. I could see his panic growing, his confident mask slipping. He tried to fabricate explanations on the spot, but every attempt only added to the evidence against him. I remained calm, letting the auditor's meticulous review do the work for me. Each mistake he had made over the months now became undeniable proof of wrongdoing. My heart pounded with quiet satisfaction, but I didn't gloat. Every moment needed patience. My brother's desperation became obvious, his hands trembling slightly as he attempted to redirect blame. It was clear he could no longer control the narrative. The auditors exchanged subtle glances, connecting the dots I had quietly provided. The underdog advantage had grown stronger, and I knew the final exposure was near. The tension in the room was electric, a silent countdown to the moment when truth would emerge. A formal family meeting was called, and my brother wasted no time accusing me again in front of everyone. His voice was loud, forceful, but I remained composed. Calmly, I handed over clean records and highlighted discrepancies he couldn't explain. Dad's eyes flicked between us, confusion fading into cautious observation. Mother's subtle doubt was now more apparent. The auditor's glances spoke volumes. They had seen the evidence and were already connecting the dots. My heart thumped quietly, but I maintained composure, knowing the payoff was near. Every step I had taken, documenting transfers, observing behavior, preparing explanations, was now aligning perfectly. My brother's frustration grew as he realized his credibility was slipping in front of the entire family. I didn't need to argue. The facts spoke for themselves. Slowly, the room shifted, the atmosphere tense with anticipation. The underdog was rising, and the first public acknowledgement of truth was about to unfold. I began revealing the manipulated transfers step by step, highlighting dates, amounts, and accounts. Mother and Dad's faces registered shock as the evidence unfolded. My brother faltered, stumbling over his own explanations. The auditors leaned in, taking notes, clearly impressed with the thoroughness of the records. Every lie he had relied on was exposed, and his attempts to redirect blame failed spectacularly. Anger, confusion, and disbelief rippled across the room. I kept my voice calm, letting the facts tell the story. Each revelation built the emotional roller coaster, shock at his audacity, anger at his betrayal, and satisfaction as the truth became undeniable. The family watched, stunned, as the web of deception unraveled. My brother's smirk disappeared entirely, replaced by fear. I felt a quiet triumph as I realized the tide had fully turned. Justice was within reach, and the final steps toward empowerment were ready to be executed. In desperation, my brother attempted to twist the story further, trying to pin certain discrepancies on me. I remained composed, letting the auditors verify each fact meticulously. His flustered voice and trembling hands betrayed his anxiety. Each attempt to manipulate the truth only reinforced the evidence against him. I stayed silent, observing, waiting for him to make more mistakes. The auditors, methodical and impartial, continued their verification, ignoring his desperate words. I felt a sense of satisfaction as his credibility crumbled before my eyes. The tension was unbearable for him, yet it empowered me. Each verified record, each trace of his unauthorized transfers, tightened the net around him. I had anticipated this desperate maneuver, and I was ready to let it backfire spectacularly. The room was quiet but electric, every family member watching, realizing the outcome was about to change drastically. My patience was paying off, and the endgame was in sight. Finally, the auditors confirmed my innocence, flagging my brother's suspicious transfers as unauthorized. His attempts to fabricate credibility had failed completely. The smug, arrogant attitude he had relied on was gone, replaced by visible anxiety and desperation. I felt a quiet, powerful satisfaction as the underdog finally had the upper hand. The auditor's acknowledgement was a small but significant victory, signaling that truth was prevailing. My brother's allies, previously unquestioning, began shifting subtly in their perceptions. Every careful step I had taken, every note and document, had led to this moment. The power dynamics in the family were changing. I realized that the careful, methodical approach had not only preserved my reputation but also set the stage for full exposure. The groundwork for final justice had been laid. Slowly, I felt relief, but I knew the ultimate confrontation was still ahead, and patience remained my most effective tool. The family fallout began immediately. Mother's anger was palpable as she confronted my brother about the deception. His credibility crumbled in front of everyone, and the smug confidence he once had evaporated. A previously silent family member, my cousin Farid, stepped forward, publicly supporting my side and confirming the discrepancies he had also noticed. The weight of collective doubt shifted heavily against my brother. I stayed calm, observing the subtle expressions of disbelief and confusion on his face. Every ally he thought he had vanished, replaced by judgment and mistrust. The tension was thick, almost tangible, and I felt a quiet satisfaction knowing patience and careful documentation had delivered this result. Each moment reinforced the inevitability of his exposure. The family dynamic had shifted irreversibly. My brother was cornered, and the final act of justice was within reach. The stage was set for the ultimate reveal. I revealed one last piece of evidence: unauthorized transfers to his personal account over the past year. The auditors stared in disbelief, flipping through the records with growing astonishment. Mother's face shifted from doubt to shock as the truth hit her fully. My brother's jaw tightened, panic overtaking him completely. Every attempt to explain away the transactions failed spectacularly. I remained calm, letting the evidence speak louder than any argument. This was the climax of months of careful planning, observation, and strategic patience. Each verified record left him cornered, unable to regain credibility. The emotional payoff for the audience and for myself was immense: shock, anger, and ultimate satisfaction. The truth was now undeniable, and justice was imminent. Thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe to my channel. Stay tuned for my next video and share your opinion in the comment. See you next Sunday. Bye.